There is a weight sitting in your chest right now. Not since today. Since June. You could not tell anyone exactly when it started, but you know the shape of it, because it shows up every time your thumb finds that USGS tab without you deciding to open it. Your hand does it before your brain catches up. You are somewhere else entirely, maybe making coffee, maybe half listening to someone talk, and your thumb is already pulling up the map. The little orange and red dots. The refresh. The scroll. You are not choosing to check. Your body is doing it for you. Maybe it happens at a red light. Maybe it happens in the middle of a meeting, phone flat on your knee under the table where no one can see the screen light up against your palm. You tell yourself it will just be a second. It is never just a second. Your eyes go straight to the cluster near the Pacific, the way another person's eyes go straight to a missed call from a number they have been waiting on. There is a small private relief in seeing nothing new, and then, almost immediately, a small private disappointment in it too, because at least a new dot would explain the pressure sitting behind your sternum. At least it would give the feeling somewhere to go. If Venezuela, Japan, and California all got hit within 8 hours of each other, why are scientists still saying there is no connection? You are not supposed to just take their word for it, are you? That question has been sitting under your ribs for weeks now, and it has not found a place to land. You keep pulling up that map and watching the ring of fire light up like a circuit board that is slowly, deliberately being switched on, one node at a time. Every week there is another M6, another country, another headline that says isolated event, unrelated system, nothing to see here. And you cannot unsee the pattern anymore. Once you see it, it does not go back to being noise. You have started doing the math without meaning to. Counting the days between one red dot and the next. Noticing that the gap seems to be shrinking, even when you are not sure your counting is accurate. Even when part of you suspects you are the kind of person who would find a pattern in static if you stared at it long enough. That suspicion does not stop the counting. It just makes the counting feel a little more private, a little more like something you would not bring up at dinner. The prophecy already described something spreading across the surface of the earth. You read that once, weeks ago. And it lodged itself somewhere you cannot quite reach to remove it. What if the pattern is not random? What if something really is waking up, and everything you have been watching since June is just the opening pages of it? My name is Roger Kessler. For 22 years, I ran the reference desk and the newspaper archive at the public library here in Springfield, Missouri. 22 years of teaching people how to cross-reference a date against 3 different wire services until the real story showed itself underneath the official one. That is not a skill you get to retire from. It just changes what you point it at. Before we go further into what the data is actually showing you, and where Baba Vanga's own recorded words fit into this, I want to ask you for something small. If this kind of pattern watching is the reason you are here, hit subscribe. Not because I need the number, because the platform only keeps feeding this kind of investigation to people who tell it clearly that they want more of it. Every subscription is a signal, and there is a lot more of this particular signal still to trace. Let me tell you exactly what your body already knows, because I want you to understand that the tightness in your chest is not irrational. It is not you being dramatic. It is pattern recognition happening faster than language. Here is the timeline, and I want you to hear it the way I first pulled it together, sitting in my archive room with 3 browser tabs open and a legal pad next to the keyboard, because old habits from the reference desk do not die. June 25th, 2026. 11:10 in the morning, Eastern Time. A magnitude 5.6 hits Northern California near Ukiah on the Macama Fault, part of the Greater San Andreas System. not catastrophic on its own. The kind of quake that makes local news and nothing more, most days. 6:04 that same evening, Eastern Time, a magnitude 7.2 foreshock strikes off the northeastern coast of Venezuela. 39 seconds later, a magnitude 7.5 mainshock hits the exact same zone. 39 seconds. Not enough time to process the first shock before the second one arrives on top of it. La Guaira state took the worst of it. 80% of the buildings in the affected zone collapsed. By July, more than 1,450 confirmed dead and tens of thousands still unaccounted for. Minutes after that, off the coast near Kuji, Japan, a magnitude 6.9. 3 continents, 1 afternoon, under 8 hours between the first tremor and the last. I have spent 2 decades of my working life cross-referencing events by date and geography. That is the exact skill this day demanded, and I am telling you, when I laid those 4 events out on the legal pad with their timestamps next to each other, my hand actually stopped moving. Not because I did not know what to write next, because some part of me, the same part that makes your thumb reach for that map without asking permission, was already asking the question you are asking right now. Can 4 earthquakes on 3 continents in 8 hours really be nothing? I want to sit with that feeling for a second longer, because I think you have been carrying it alone, and you should not be. You are not the only one watching this. A woman in Los Angeles wrote that every time a new M6 pops up anywhere on the Ring of Fire tracker, she panics that her city is next in some kind of sequence. Her exact words stayed with me. She said her family is in Southern California, and every new dot feels less like an isolated news item and more like watching a countdown she cannot read yet. A man in Caracas who survived June 25th said every tremor he feels now feels like the next chapter in something much bigger beginning. Think about what that means, actually sitting with it for a second. He lived through the exact event we are talking about. He is not speculating from a comfortable distance. Every aftershock, every small tremor since, lands in his body as a sentence in an ongoing story, not as an isolated data point. That is not paranoia. That is what it means to have already survived Chapter 1. Someone else, on a forum most people have never heard of, put it more plainly than any headline dared to. No mainstream outlet is connecting the dots between Venezuela, Japan, California, Mexico, the Philippines. But when you put them on a single map, they form a perfect arc around the Pacific. And someone in a geology forum asked the question that I think is the sharpest one in this entire conversation. Scientists keep saying these faults are thousands of miles apart, as if distance alone settles the matter. But the 2011 Tohoku quake triggered tremors in Oklahoma, on the other side of an entire ocean and most of a continent. So why, in 2026, would a global pattern suddenly become impossible? You are not imagining an arc that is not there. You are looking at the same map thousands of other people are refreshing right now, at this exact hour, for the exact same reason you are. Somewhere tonight, someone in Los Angeles is doing it. Someone in Caracas is doing it. Someone in the Philippines, still cleaning up from July 14th, is doing it too. You are not alone in that room with your phone. You just cannot see the others doing the same thing at the same hour for the same reason. And here is the part that I think matters most, the part almost nobody says out loud. It is not weakness that your chest tightens when you see another red dot appear. It is not anxiety in the clinical sense, some flaw in how your nervous system is wired. It is recognition. Your body is doing something ancient and correct. It is noticing a pattern before your mind has assembled the vocabulary to explain what it is noticing. That gap between the noticing and the naming is exactly where you have been living since June. So let's close part of that gap. Let's look at what the scientists actually said, because I promised you I would not just wave my hands at authority the way some corners of the internet do. I want to give you the real investigation. Seismologists at UCLA formally asked the exact question sitting in your chest right now. Did the tremors in California and Japan trigger the pair of earthquakes in Venezuela? That was the actual title of their inquiry. Their conclusion, using something called static Coulomb stress transfer, was that California and Japan were not geographically close enough to Venezuela's fault system to mechanically trigger it. Each major fault in their model operates within its own separate tectonic plate boundary, sealed off from the others. Now, here is what I want you to notice, because it is easy to miss on a quick skim of a headline. The fact that UCLA seismologists formally studied this question, published their methodology, and put their names on the answer tells you something important. Your instinct that the question deserved to be asked was correct. Scientists do not spend research hours investigating things that are obviously laughably impossible. They investigated it because it was worth investigating. But a not connected verdict on one specific mechanism is not the same as nothing is happening here. Go back to sleep. Static stress transfer is one narrow lens. There is another kind of triggering, dynamic wave triggering, where the actual seismic waves traveling through the Earth alter pore pressure in distant unrelated faults. It operates at a completely different scale than static models can capture. And here is a fact worth sitting with. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake in Japan, a magnitude 9.1, triggered detectable tremors in Oklahoma. Documented, published, not folklore. So when someone tells you the case is closed because two fault systems are technically separate, I would gently push back. The case is not quite as closed as that headline wants you to feel. I think this is where a lot of people get talked out of trusting what they are noticing. Somebody with a headline and a confident tone tells them not connected, and they hear not real, and they let go of something their own eyes had been tracking accurately. I do not want that to happen to you tonight. The scientists were not wrong about what they measured. They were precise about one mechanism in one narrow model. But precise is not the same as complete. Held next to Oklahoma trembling from a quake on the other side of an ocean, these faults are too far apart to matter starts to sound less like a settled fact and more like a working theory that has not caught up to everything the planet has already shown us it can do. That is your first real answer today. Hold on to it, there is more, because June 25th was not the end of anything. It was the middle of something that was already moving, and it kept moving after the news cycle turned its attention elsewhere. July 13th. Magnitude 6.3 near the Loyalty Islands, off New Caledonia in the Southwest Pacific. July 14th, barely a day later, magnitude 6.2 in the Philippines near Sarangani, with multiple magnitude 5 events rippling across the Pacific within the same 24 hours. July 17th, a magnitude 7.3 on the Mexico-Guatemala border, serious enough that a tsunami warning was issued before being canceled. And through the 19th to the 21st, the surge kept going. Indonesia, Alaska, Central America. I want you to actually picture that stretch of days the way I did, tracking it in real time from my archive room here in Missouri, about as far from any plate boundary as you can get in this country. Landlocked. Stable ground under my own feet, quite literally. I have never once felt so much as a rattle of a window from an earthquake in my entire life here. And still, every single day for almost a month, another major event lighting up somewhere along that same curved line around the Pacific on a screen in front of me, while the floor under my own chair never moved once. That contrast is part of what makes this so disorienting to sit with. You can be in a place with perfectly solid, unmoving ground, thousands of miles from any of it, and still feel the floor tilt a little every time a new red dot appears. The threat is not under your feet. It is in the pattern itself, and patterns do not care how far away you are standing. You said it yourself in your own words before you even found this video. You have been watching the Ring of Fire tracker obsessively since June 25th. Every week, another major quake in a new location. This cannot all be coincidence. I am not here to tell you that feeling is wrong. I am here to tell you it is backed by a documented, verifiable timeline. That part is not in dispute. The dispute is only about what it means. And there is context here that goes back even further than June, that almost nobody brings into this conversation. Seismic monitoring analysis going back to the first weeks of January 2026 already showed elevated earthquake activity along the entire Ring of Fire, from South America up through the west coast of North America, into Alaska, across to Japan, down through the Philippines, all the way to New Zealand. Public anxiety about it was already building months before the Venezuela-Japan-California day even happened. Which means June 25th was not an isolated spike out of nowhere. It was a continuation of something that had already been quietly building since the first days of the year. The whole year has had this undertone running through it. You just did not have the full picture until events on 3 continents happened in the same afternoon and forced you to start paying attention. Let's pause here, because I think you deserve a moment to actually feel what I am describing, instead of just receiving it as information. You have been carrying this, alone, mostly. Because when you tried to bring it up, someone probably told you the same thing the skeptics always say. 4 earthquakes in one day means nothing, they will tell you. The Earth records hundreds of quakes every single day. That is just background noise. You are pattern matching on nothing. Here are the actual numbers because I think you deserve them plainly. The planet averages roughly 13 earthquakes of magnitude 5 or higher every single day across the entire globe. That is the background hum most people never think about. The low static of a planet that is always quietly shifting somewhere. Most of those 13 never make a headline. They happen under oceans, in unpopulated mountain ranges, in places with no news crew anywhere near them, and the planet absorbs them the way your own body absorbs thousands of small involuntary movements a day without your mind ever registering a single one. But having 3 separate events at magnitude 5.6 or higher on 3 different continents within 8 hours of each other, including a 7.2 and 7.5 doublet only 39 seconds apart, in Venezuela specifically, falls well outside that routine background noise by any statistical measure anyone wants to apply. That is not 13 quiet, scattered background events. That is 3 specific, damaging, headline-generating events, each large enough to stand alone as major news, arriving within a single work shift on 3 different sides of the planet. And July's data confirms the density did not drop off afterward. It kept producing exceptional magnitude 6+ activity globally, all the way through a 7.3 in Mexico, following a 6.9 in Japan within 3 weeks of the Venezuela doublet. If June 25th had been a single strange afternoon and then silence, I would be telling you a very different story right now. It was not silence. It was the opening of something that kept going. So the next time someone tells you it is just normal Earth noise, you now have the actual figures in your pocket. 13 a day is the baseline. What you have been watching since June is not the baseline. There is one more objection I want to hand you, because I know some of you have already run into it in a comment section somewhere, maybe even used it yourself to talk yourself out of the feeling in your chest. Someone will tell you that Baba Vanga's language, 7 to 8% of the Earth's surface, is so vague it could apply to almost any bad year for natural disasters. That criticism is fair, as far as it goes. And I am not going to pretend it is not a real weakness in how the prophecy reads, but it misses what the documentation actually is. What Krasimira Stoyanova recorded was never offered as a measurable forecast with numbers you could check against a seismograph. It was an image, a description of upheaval spreading across the surface of the world, piece by piece. The value in it was never meant to be scientific precision. It is a shape, a process, and whether that process matches what you have been watching since June is not a question I can hand you the answer to. It is a question I am handing back to you. There is a name for what your chest has been doing this whole time. I did not want to give it to you yet because I wanted you to feel the weight of the evidence first, the way I felt it, laid out on that legal pad. But I think you are ready for it now. This document exists. It was not written after the fact to fit these earthquakes. It was recorded years before them by a woman named Krasimira Stoyanova, the niece of Baba Vanga and the official guardian of her formally documented legacy at the Institute of Suggestology in Sofia, Bulgaria. Stoyanova is the only living person with direct access to that original archive. And what she formally recorded, in Vanga's own words, was this: earthquakes and other geological activities, along with climate events of every kind, would bring destruction to 7 to 8% of the Earth's surface. Read that again in your mind. Destruction to 7 to 8% of the Earth's surface. Not one region, not one fault line. The surface, spreading. That is what your chest was already responding to before you had the words for it. Not superstition, not panic for no reason. Recognition of a described pattern, matched against a real, unfolding, documented pattern. The gap between what you were feeling and what you could name has just closed a little. Think about the geography for a second, laid out the way I laid it out on that legal pad. Northern California, the Venezuelan coast, offshore Japan, then, in the weeks after, the Loyalty Islands, the Philippines, the Mexico-Guatemala border, Indonesia, Alaska, Central America. That is not a single point on a map. That is a moving line, touching one coastline and then another, working its way around the entire rim of the Pacific in a matter of weeks. Whatever you think about the word prophecy, the shape of a line moving across the surface of the planet, one region at a time, is exactly the shape the documented wording describes. I am not asking you to accept that as proof. I am asking you to notice that the shape matches and to sit with what that means to you on your own terms. What I can tell you is what the recorded prophecy says comes after the geological destruction. And I am not going to give you that piece today. I know exactly how that sounds, and I know some of you are frustrated hearing it. But some things need to be earned in the right order. The same way I would not hand a researcher the conclusion of an archive search before showing them the primary sources that get them there. What Krasimira Stoyanova says Baba Vanga described as coming next, after the 7 to 8%, is worse than the earthquakes themselves. That is the honest, documented next line. I am telling you it exists. I am not telling you what it says. Not yet. Let's go back for a second to that image of your thumb finding the map without asking permission. You know that motion now. You know it is not compulsion in the way people usually mean that word, some flaw to be fixed or medicated away. It was your own nervous system doing exactly what mine did over that legal pad in June, cross-referencing a felt pattern against a described one, trying to close a gap between sensation and meaning. The weight in your chest was never irrational. It was your body arriving at a conclusion before your language could catch up to it. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to trust carefully, while still holding the honest uncertainty of it in the same hand. I think that is the part people misunderstand most about this kind of pattern watching from the outside. It gets dismissed as fear, as doom scrolling, as anxiety looking for a place to attach itself. And sometimes, honestly, it is exactly that. And no amount of documentation changes that some of us are wired to spiral. But it can also be something else entirely. It can be the same discipline that let me spend 2 decades helping people find the real story buried under the official one, just aimed for once at my own chest instead of someone else's research question. Not every uncomfortable feeling is a malfunction. Some of them are working exactly as designed. I want to tell you something that happened to me because I think it belongs here, and I have never told it anywhere else. About a week after June 25th, I was in the archive room, late, after the library had closed to the public, going through old microfilm reels from decades of Springfield newspapers, cross-checking something completely unrelated for a local historical society project. And somewhere around 11 at night, I found myself out of nowhere opening the USGS feed on my phone instead of finishing the reel I was on. I sat there in that quiet room, surrounded by 4 decades of yellowed newsprint on spools, watching a live map of a planet 3,000 miles away, lighting up in real time. The reel I had been working on was still glowing on the microfilm reader beside me, frozen on a front page from 1980-something, some flood story from before I was even hired. I remember the hum of that old machine's bulb, the particular smell the room gets after 9 at night when the building's air system throttles down, dust and paper and warm plastic. And there I was, phone in one hand, thumb tracing little circles over a cluster of dots off the coast of Chile that had appeared sometime that afternoon, feeling my own pulse in my throat, the way you feel it when you are waiting for test results. Except nobody had ordered any test and nothing was actually wrong with me at all. Nothing I could point to. Just the hum, the dust, the glow of 2 screens telling 2 different stories from 2 different centuries, and my chest doing the thing it had been doing since June. I sat with that feeling for longer than I want to admit, long enough that the automatic lights in the far end of the archive room clicked off from lack of motion, and I did not get up to trigger them again. I just sat there in the half-dark, one screen lighting my face, thinking about how many other people, in how many other quiet rooms around the world right then, were doing exactly the same thing I was, refreshing, watching, waiting for a pattern to either confirm itself or let them go. It struck me, sitting there completely alone in a building that smelled like old paper and dust, how strange it was that the instinct to cross-reference does not turn off just because you clock out. It follows you into the quiet room at 11 at night. It followed me. I suspect if you are honest with yourself, it has been following you too. That instinct is not something wrong with either of us. It is the same instinct that built the entire discipline of seismology in the first place. Someone, somewhere, refused to accept coincidence as a complete answer, and kept looking anyway. Before we get to where I think this arc is actually heading, and to what I am willing to say about what comes after the 7 to 8%, I want to ask you for something else, something different from the subscribe button. If this video gave you something, if it took that weight in your chest and gave it language, Even language with honest uncertainty built into it. Consider leaving a super thanks. I am not going to pretend that is a small ask or dress it up as anything other than what it is. What I can tell you is where it goes. It goes directly into keeping the USGS feed open at midnight, into keeping the subscription to the seismic bulletins active, into the hours it takes to cross-reference a claim like Stoyanova's original documentation against the actual dated events before I ever bring it to you. This is not content assembled from a headline in 20 minutes. Every timestamp I gave you tonight, 11:10 in the morning, 6:04 in the evening, 39 seconds apart, came from cross-checking multiple wire services against each other. The same way I would have taught a patron to verify a disputed fact at the reference desk 20 years ago. It is built the same way I built newspaper cross-references for 22 years. One verified fact laid next to another, nothing accepted on the strength of a single source alone. If that work has value to you, a super thanks is how you tell me directly, not through an algorithm, that it does. You are not just someone watching a video end to end. You are someone who has been tracking this pattern independently in your own life, refreshing the same map, asking the same question long before you found this channel. That makes you part of how this archive gets built, not just a visitor to it. Now, let me finish laying out where this arc stands because you deserve the full picture before you go. Here is what I think is honestly true without overselling it and without dismissing it. The documented timeline is not in question. 4 major earthquakes, 3 continents, 8 hours, June 25th. Then a continuing surge through July across the Loyalty Islands, the Philippines, Mexico, Indonesia, Alaska, Central America. Then the deeper context of elevated ring of fire activity going back to January. None of that is speculation. That is USGS data, volcano discoveries, world earthquake reporting, and seismic monitoring analysis, all independently documented. What UCLA's seismologists confirmed is also not in question. Static stress transfer did not mechanically link California and Japan to Venezuela. That is their finding, and I am not going to distort it to make my case sound stronger than it is. And I want to be just as honest about the other side of this. I am not a seismologist. I never claimed to be one. What I am is someone trained for 22 years to notice when a pattern of dates and places is too consistent to wave away. And someone who has spent those same years learning exactly how easy it is to see a pattern that is not really there, if you want badly enough to see it. I hold both of those truths at the same time when I look at this arc. That tension does not resolve neatly. I am not going to pretend it does just to give you a cleaner ending. What remains genuinely open, what I cannot hand you a clean verdict on, is whether the recorded words of a woman who has been dead since 1996, preserved by her niece at an institute in Sofia, describing destruction spreading across 7 to 8% of the Earth's surface, are pointing at exactly this arc, this year, this pattern you have been watching with your own eyes since June. I have given you the documented prophecy. I have given you the documented earthquakes. I have not told you what Vanga is recorded as saying comes next after the destruction spreads. That piece is still sitting in my archive, waiting for the right moment to bring it forward. It is coming. Not today. For now, I want you to go back for a second to that moment at the very start. Making coffee, maybe, or half listening to someone talk. Your thumb already moving toward the map before you decided to let it. The little orange and red dots, the refresh, the scroll you did not consciously choose to make. You know now what that motion actually was. It was not a bad habit. It was not you being dramatic or anxious for no reason, or seeing connections in random noise the way the skeptics wanted you to believe. It was the same instinct that once made me stop moving with a pen in my hand over a legal pad, and the same instinct that pulled me toward a phone screen in a dark archive room at 11 at night instead of going home. Recognition, arriving in the body before the mind had assembled the words for it. Your thumb was not checking for nothing. It was checking because some part of you had already noticed the shape of something and was waiting for the rest of you to catch up. The tightness in your chest, the one that sent your thumb to that map without permission, the one that first pulled you toward a video with this title. It has a shape now. It has a documented timeline behind it and a documented prophecy sitting next to that timeline, and an honest gap of uncertainty in between the two that I refuse to paper over with false confidence. You were not being irrational this whole time. You were noticing something real, in real time, before you had anywhere to put it. Now you have somewhere to put it. Before you go, I want to hear from you directly, because this is the part of the process I actually care about most. The comment section is where I find out which pieces of a pattern people have already noticed on their own, sometimes before I do. So tell me this. Where were you on June 25th, or in the days right after, when you first noticed this pattern starting to form? Was it the news alert on your phone? Was it a family member somewhere along the ring of fire? Was it like me, a night alone with a live map open for no reason you could immediately explain? Write it below. I read every one of them, and more than once. Something in the comments has ended up shaping which document I go dig up next. One more thing, before I let you go. Whatever you decide about the prophecy itself, whatever you decide about how much weight to give a document recorded decades before any of this happened, I want you to hold on to the other thing we talked about tonight. The thing in your chest was never the problem. It was information, arriving early in a language your body understood before your mind had the vocabulary for it. That is worth trusting, even while you keep asking questions. Especially while you keep asking questions. I'm Roger Kessler. The archive stays open. I will see you in the next one when I finally tell you what she said comes after.